All right, so let's get started. We have, I'm a prompt person, so we're gonna get started on time and we have lots to talk about. So thank you everybody for being here today. Just a little housekeeping. We have this set up so those of you that are attending will not be seen, so you have some privacy and confidentiality. We can see your names if you've registered with your name. And then you'll have the opportunity anytime to chat questions. So after some introductory information and some conversation, we'll be just having a conversation and talking and chatting. So I will monitor the chat to the best of my ability while I multitask. So bear with me and kind of weed through questions and try to sift through them into themes for our conversation today. So my name is Tamar Matthew, and I'm the Department Director of Family Enrichment Services here at Penquis, and I'm also the Executive Director of Rape Response Services. Penquis is committed to creating strong communities and supporting healthy and safe lives. And so we know that individuals are not safe unless they can be free from violence, and that's why really we're so pleased to be here as a part of this event and to have the opportunity for this great conversation. So we are joined by my colleagues from Partners for Peace, Cindy Freeman-Sear and Casey Falkingham. And they're going to talk a little bit more about themselves and what they do a little bit later on in our plan for the agenda today. We are also very honored to be joined by Patrisha McLean. She is the president and founder of Finding Our Voices, which is a new nonprofit survivor-based organization breaking the silence of domestic abuse in Maine. So welcome, Patrisha. We're so glad that you spearheaded this and got us moving and got this going today. So thank you. So I have been asked, I don't know why to start this way, but I've been asked to share my history as a victim advocate, which took me a while to think through. So, I mean, I think, to be honest, that victim advocacy is an area of interest and passion for me. And has been for a very long time. I feel really strongly that we have the right to be safe and that no one has the right to take that from us. So I started working at Pine Tree Legal and then the Penquis Law Project over 20 years ago, representing victims of domestic violence, sexual assault and stalking and family matters and protection orders. And so from that and the training I received, I actually was a volunteer advocate for what was then Woman Care in Piscataquis County, and I served on the board for a while, and I was a volunteer advocate at Rape Response Services as well. So from that, I've been on different statewide committees and boards pertaining to domestic and sexual violence. So the Law Project is a collaboration with Partners for Peace, and since the Law Project started, we've collaborated on many more projects, including transitional housing, which we provide together in our rural housing areas, and also the Batterers Intervention Program here in Penobscot and Piscataquis Counties. And then in some ways, my focus shifted from domestic violence to sexual assault, or to a more encompassing view of interpersonal violence, when Rape Response Services became a subsidiary of Penquis in 2008. And we opened the Penquis Children's Advocacy Center here in 2016. So I think overall, it's just work that I am passionate about, and I'm passionate about making change in our communities and helping our communities be safe. So today, though, I'm really interested in finding out more about Patrisha and her story. And really, Patrisha, what has inspired you to create the Finding Our Voices project?
I think what happened was when my husband was arrested and went through the court process, which was probably as traumatic as the abuse I suffered in my marriage. It was weird, but like many months, like months after the arrest, and this is 29 years of sexual, financial, emotional, physical abuse, what I kept ruminating about, and I learned that word ruminate when you're just stuck on something, you just can't get past it. And it was really just what happened to me in the whole court process, from the DA, victim advocate, they call themselves victim advocate, they're working for the DA, they were no advocate of mine, to the lawyers that I had. the only bright spot was the domestic abuse agency, Next Step, that was helping me. They were amazing. But other than that, I was just so traumatized by everything. And then I thought that the sweetheart deal that my ex got, which after he was arrested on, I think, 6 charges, and it involved hours of holding me captive. I had bruises all over my body. We had photos of the door that he broke down to get to me. And he got nothing. He got a fine of a few $1,000s. And the district attorney, the prosecutor at the time, Christopher Fernald, made a statement to the Bangor Daily News saying that the sentence was right in line with every perpetrator of domestic violence, basically saying that he wasn't treated better than anybody else. And I thought, this is ridiculous. It's because he's rich and famous and he had a really good lawyer that he got that sweetheart deal. But come to find out a few years later that that Christopher Fernald was right. That is standard. These guys are not held accountable. And also, what started Firing Our Voices was after I was strong enough emotionally, because of the help I got from the domestic abuse agency, just all the women coming up to me and telling me, now that my secret was out and for everyone to see, because it was headlines about the arrest, that they too had gone through it. And they had kept quiet about it, shame, all different kinds of reasons. And there had been no accountability for the perpetrator either, but that was sort of secondary to the fact. For them, it was more that they just, were carrying this toxic load of this abuse that they had suffered. And so I just decided I wanted to, everyone had to see what I could see now. The veil was lifted. People were telling me about what's really going on here, where I thought I was alone for 29 years. I didn't even know the term really domestic abuse. I never would have told you I was a domestic abuse victim. So I decided, I'm a photojournalist, and just decided to take portraits of these women that I knew who were telling me that they had gone through it. But audio, really important, because our voice is so stifled in the abuse and in the process after, if it comes to the attention of the courts. So we added audio, and there's recordings of each woman telling their story. And since then we had exhibits, and then banners that are 4 foot by 2 in downtown windows touring the state. It's just taken off like crazy. And there's bookmarks, and Cindy and Casey have been very involved with all of this, because Cindy reached out to me a couple of years ago when I had the exhibit. She wanted me to bring the exhibit to her area. And then COVID, then we brought the banners there, and they've also, Partners for Peace have taken a lot of the bookmarks and given the bookmarks out. So it's just about providing a platform for women to use their survivors to have their voice. And I also have a radio show, WERU. It's Let's Talk About. It's all about Let's Talk About It, and it's talking with survivors.
Well, that's amazing and powerful that your experience opened up doors for other folks to be able to come forward and speak, and that you've been able to record them in such a powerful way. I
just want to say there's 30 women on banners now, 30 survivors from 18 to 80, wow. And including an architect, nurse, a prisoner, and a prison guard. And another 15 have talked to me on the radio. And
so brave, yeah. It's just so brave to come forward and share stories like that, and so impactful. Renee, are you able to show the video now? So this is the video. What we did is can I just say a few minutes about to set up for the movie? So what happened was, when COVID happened, I had a lot of exhibits lined up, including Boston and Connecticut. We were going outside of Maine. The exhibit opened at my Camden Public Library, and then it was in the Holocaust and Human Rights Center in Augusta for 3.5 months. And then it was just had a full schedule this year of going to different places. And then COVID, and these places were being closed down. We couldn't get in there. And I realized that domestic abuse is even worse during COVID. Got to find a way to get our message out to the people who need it, community education, and the women who feel they're alone. And so we came up with the idea of the banners. And within a few weeks, we had 70 businesses in the Mid-Coast agree to put these banners, which are 4 foot by 2 foot,
in their windows, and some of them are, considered pretty edgy. One of the women says, "He killed my dog." It's a quote from each woman. And so I just thought it would be important to document this because it was so amazing that in 85 business windows to see these women that are usually hidden in the shadows of shame, and discounted and don't have a voice, to be standing there, standing proud, speaking loud on these banners. So I connected with a filmmaker, Danielle Quintanilla, and he produced this little film that documents and preserves that phenomenon. And I thought it was a one-time thing because of COVID, but since then the banners are touring all around the state.
He smacked me in the face. I mean, I cried, he cried, and he was like, "I've never done that before," and of course I believed him. It's weird, it's like you don't believe them, but you do at the same time because you want to. Your brain tells you to, because otherwise, at that point you're already invested.
It wasn't until we moved to Denver and I was away from everyone I knew that things took a turn for the worse.
Everything was fine for a while, and then it was like that line was crossed, and he could tell me what to do and how to spend my time and who to spend it with.
And he sat on the bed and he was rocking back and forth and he goes, Liv, I'm sorry, I love you so much, I'm sorry. Tell them everything's fine. And I do remember saying to him, you don't do this to somebody you love.
He never physically assaulted me, but he tortured me psychologically.
That's when the financial abuse began. He stopped paying child support and alimony only a few months after our divorce was finalized. This would be his new weapon of choice, financial abuse, which you don't go to jail for.
Leaving Charlie was the beginning of a metamorphosis or a resurrection of who I was. That person never left, but she was buried deep, deep, deep inside a big dark hole inside of me.
I remember there was one day I was standing on a chair and he kicked the chair and I fell. I was just scared. Why did you do that? The emotional abuse went on for years, and then he started to escalate into animals.
about once a month, he would snap at me for days, then start a fight over nothing. Sometimes a switch would flip, and there was no reaching him and no turning back. He spewed out horrific words and phrases, pulled my hair, punched and kicked me.
The confusion, the mind games, just dumb stuff. You're always walking on eggshells, always worried about what his mood's gonna be, what his temper's gonna be, revolving around him pretty much.
Phone call that you have to make to tell somebody that I have nowhere to go. I've let myself be abused. I need help. When everything in your head is screaming, just give him one more chance. From that moment, that's when you go over the hill and things start to get better.
You know, one of the last things that he said to me was, every time you look in the mirror, you're going to remember me because you're going to see that scar.
Thank you, Patricia. I feel like everybody probably needs a deep breath after watching that. But tell us a little bit about, well, one of the things I just wanted to ask you, because or point out, is that we are so used to seeing actors and actresses and pictures and advertisements, but those are the actual people sharing their story in the banners, correct? And I think that's part of, to me, what's so powerful.
Somebody from Bar Harbor, the banners were an MDI, all over MDI this summer, and someone let me know that they were having a little debate over whether these are models. Someone was saying it has to be models because they've worked in this field and social work field, and they know that, you know, this confidentiality, you don't show the faces. And that's when I decided to put the names on the quote. So this has been an evolution with the banners. We keep tweaking them, and now that the person's first name is on there. It's, you know, not everybody, it's interesting because for instance, we had a piece in the New York Times, and every time we get coverage, I used to think that a lot of people would get in touch with me and want to be on the banners, and it's very slow because this is tough, you know, and a lot of times there's physical, it's dangerous. You know, it's dangerous to put yourself out there. But a lot of women have told me that they feel safer putting their face out there. And, you know, I just make sure that anybody who wants to do it is absolutely solid, like they want to do it, and they feel empowered by it. And everybody who has come forward and been on a banner, they just let me know it's just changed their life, really, because they just feel so empowered and they just feel so much stronger, not keeping the secret inside them anymore, that it's not their shame. And if they're if they feel emotionally ready to do it, I'm providing a platform for them to do that physically, you know, and emotionally safe enough. Mm-hmm.
So I know you've been working with Partners for Peace to bring the banners to Penobscot and Piscataquis Counties. So I don't know if you want to talk about that first, or Casey and Cindy, you want to introduce yourselves a little bit more, or
a little bit about what they do. Could we talk to them, and then we can come back to banners? Oh, can I just say that Cindy is the one who Cindy's the one who first wanted to, bring the banners, and I've worked with Casey and Cindy both to get the banners to their counties. So I'm interested to find out more from these ladies about what they do.
Cindy, you want to go ahead?
Sure. First of all, thank you, everybody, for this opportunity. It is an honor to work with all of you and to know that we're kind of all in this together, because I was thinking about this when you, Patricia, were talking about the loneliness of COVID. And, you know, even in our work, we've been working alone for a really long time. And so this opportunity to be together as a team feels really good to me. So gosh, it feels like another lifetime, but at some point over a year ago, Patricia and I began to talk about wanting to bring a presentation to the rural parts of our catchment area, which is, you know, most of where we are. And we were working together to bring a presentation to Millinocket, and had all kinds of partners on board: the higher education center, the police, the town council, the hospital. Was going to actually even provide Patricia a place to stay that night. So we had all these great arrangements made for what was going to be, I think, a wonderful presentation in the Millinocket area, and lots of people on board with that. And then, of course, we all know what happened. This was going to happen on April 2nd. So that didn't happen. And then Patricia began to talk with me about the banners, and I had spent time looking at these amazing photographs of these amazing women and listening to their voices, and thought about, well, we could do banners, and we could do, you know. So anyway, we just sort of hopped on board. We have many banners around Dover Foxcroft at this point and beyond, along the Route 7 corridor. I think what you asked me to really talk about is our work, and perhaps how, Patricia, your work now becomes so important to us as a way of reaching people. You know, you can tell by the color of my hair that I've been at this for a while, and so I feel like now, as I walk through Dover Foxcroft and see these amazing faces of very brave women, it's an affirmation, I think, to all of us who have had our own experiences. And I think the coverage that Finding Our Voices has in the media is really providing another opening for people to reach out for help and services from Partners for Peace. I'm not sure, you know, that people have called us because they saw the number on the banner, but I'm pretty sure that's happened. And so I think important for everybody who's on this call to know is that whatever one's story, wherever anyone is in their journey, when they pick up the phone, they are met with, you know, where they're at, without judgment, without question about decisions they've made or may want to make. Just before coming onto this Zoom presentation, I was talking with a woman that I'm going to meet at court in the morning, and the last thing I said to her was, this is for you. I have no expectations about what you're going to ask the judge for in the morning, what you need. This is for you. And so I think it's very important for people to know that as they consider reaching out, consider finding their voices, maybe through making a call to our helpline. That's what they're met with. This is about them. It is not about any expectations that we have, or so I guess I'll leave it there. And maybe Casey, you want to say some more about our particular services?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So Cindy and I work at Partners for Peace, which is the Domestic Violence Resource Center for Penobscot and Piscataquis Counties. We are a part of a Maine coalition to end domestic violence, it's called. There are our mothership, so to speak. They umbrella all 9 domestic violence resource centers in the state. We're all connected in that way. So some of you may not come from the area. I know my mom is on this call, so she's from Aroostook County, so she's familiar with Hope and Justice Project up in Aroostook County. There are sister organizations. So again, we're all connected, lots of really great resources, as well as the sexual assault resource centers that we partner with. As Tamara was speaking, she's the executive director of rape response services. So of course, as folks can imagine, we do a lot of collaboration for survivors. And Cindy, I love what you said about, it's really about what the survivor needs, and it's not about our expectations. And we're consistently saying, the survivor drives the train, because so often people who have been affected by abuse, they've not been able to make a lot of decisions for themselves because they've had this abuser in their life, telling them what they can and can't do. And we're not about to be another person who's doing that. So we are there to help people in whatever ways they would like help, and help people find safety and justice in whatever definitions that might be for each individual, because I find that every survivor has a different sense of what justice would look like for them. And I think that's really important as we talk about resources, and we talk about, okay, what is it to break the silence, and how does that help us seek justice? And I'm reminded of a quote that we often use in the movement from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who was really integral in the liberation of South Africa. And he defines justice. He says there are 3 parts to justice. The first is that the truth be told. And secondly, that the truth be told about the harm that was done. And secondly, that the harm be repaired to the highest degree possible. So the truth be told, the harm be repaired. And the third is that we seek to change the conditions that produced the harm. And so when I think about finding our voices, I think about how that is helping survivors tell their truths about the harm that was done to them, in that first part of seeking justice. And how can we listen and amplify to these stories of these truths, in order to inform the ways that we are working to repair harm, and how we are working to change the conditions, or in some senses, the systems that perpetuate harm. So if I were to say, what do we do as domestic violence advocates? Well, that's what we do. And it's a big job. It's a big job. Yeah.
Casey, when I think of advocates, I think of listening. Like, I try to distill it down to listening, believing, providing information, and honoring choices. So I feel like it is a big job, but that's what we do as advocates. But I think that's also what people in the community can do themselves, whether they're officially an advocate or not. You're an advocate for yourself, you're an advocate for your community, you're an advocate for your neighbors, in all of those ways. So one question from the chat, Patricia, are the women on the banners just from Maine or from all over the country? Yeah, we're curious about that.
Well, it started out in the beginning, it was going to be, I could have done it just from my community, because there were absolutely there was about 15 women all around me, hairdresser, the mother of my daughter's best friend, and, my neighbor, but then I decided, well, I'm going to spread it all over Maine. So make it more of a Maine project. So we've got, Janine Lubber, Oren in Casco, and Mary Lou Smith in Scarborough. Then we have some people up in a woman in Machias, Bangor. So yeah, it kind of spans the state.
One more question in the chat before we move forward, talking a little bit about the banners. I think, Patricia, you wanted to talk about the banners that were in Dover Foxcroft right now. But one person asked, if someone comes to them as a victim of abuse, how can they enable them to find support? So after I've listened and heard what they're willing to share, what do you recommend next? And first of all, I just want to honor the fact that listening and hearing is such a huge part of what you can offer, that you've already done so much if that's what you've done. Casey or Cindy, do you want to speak to how someone can refer to services?
I can start, and Cindy can certainly add in. Yeah, I think that Tamara just said it really well, that listening and believing really is just absolutely crucial. We do a very lengthy training for our new advocates, and actually one of our trainees who's in training right now said to me, like, I get the listening part, I get that, but when do I get to help the person? I said, oh, well, you already have if you're listening, right? Like that really is helping. That really is a gift that you're giving someone. And so of course there is more. There's more help to be done. Of course there is, but I don't want to minimize the fact that listening to someone, hearing their story, hearing it with non-judgment, and not forcing someone to do something that maybe they're not ready to do, or it's just not going to be their path. That is absolutely crucial. So first of all, if you are a service provider, or you are someone who's helping a victim survivor of abuse, and you're not sure how to help, call us, right? Like if you're not exactly sure, I don't know what to do next, I suspect this person is experiencing abuse, or maybe I know and I don't know how to help, please know that our services are here for you. Our 24-hour helpline is here for you. You're not going to like tie up the line. We can take more than one call at once because, yeah, we have that capability nowadays. In fact, we can take 3 or 4 at once. It's a tad overwhelming, but we do it, and we do it well. And so call us and we can help you. We can guide you through how to help this person. Maybe the way that you help is helping them get connected to a helpline, help them get connected to services. Some people find it helpful if you say, would you like me to call with you? Or maybe you have them in your office and you want to provide them the phone to be able to do that, because maybe it's not safe for them to call when they're at home, or maybe the only time that they have away from their abuser really is during their counseling session once a week, and so that really is their opportunity to call. That's absolutely what we're here for. Another great thing to do is help provide accurate information, because people who are abusive are really good at manipulating information and isolating their victims so that there's a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty. And so providing accurate information about services that are available is another really great, another great resource. And so at Partners for Peace, we have weekly support groups, which we have brought to the virtual world. Every Wednesday evening, we host support groups. People can get connected with those support groups through calling the helpline. We provide lots of legal support, so if people would like to engage with the criminal justice or the civil justice systems, we can be helpful with that. So some people choose to get protection orders, which can be a really useful tool in someone's toolbox, really helpful part of someone's safety plan. And really what we can do is help people manage their risks. What are the risks associated with different options that someone might have? So
I could speak to how they helped me, maybe from a survivor point of view.
Absolutely.
So I had a protection from abuse order, and I was pressured. Well, it was a temporary, but I was pressured from my ex's lawyers to drop it because if I had it, then he wouldn't be able to go to Australia and tour or something. And I was really surprised at the way the judge accepted that. I signed a piece of paper. It was actually one of his lawyers who came to my house and pressured me to sign it and said, you could always get it back tomorrow, which is not true. I thought the judge might call me and say, are you sure you want to drop this? But that didn't happen. The judge just accepted it and it was dropped. And so I went through quite a long period of trying to get it back. And my lawyer at the time, Jean Libby from Biddeford, who was horrible. Don't hire him if you're a woman and you've been through DV. But he kept saying, he did not go along with the fact that I wanted a protection from abuse order. He kept saying the bail conditions cover this. It's extraneous and you don't need it. And so, but I just felt I really wanted it. And I ended up going to Next Step. And it was just amazing. Missy Fairfield brought me into her office and I just explained it to her. And that's exactly right, what Casey said. It was that she believed me. Like I just saw right away, like, because you're so used to year after year, you're lying, you're crazy, trying to minimize what we've been through. She absolutely believed me. That was huge in itself. And then she said, yeah, you need this protection from abuse order and you can get it. And even everybody was telling me that I wouldn't be able to get it because I had dropped it and there was no new supposed evidence. But she said, we're going to get it. I think we can do this. And it's because of her help really that I did end up getting it. And the other thing that I came to realize is that and this is what I tell women now, I was an absolute wreck. I mean, I was such in a state over everything that had been going on. And well, one thing they did is they gave me the copy of Lundy Bancroft's book, the Domestic Abuse Agency gave me this copy. They have books that they give you. And it's Why Does He Do That? Inside the Mind of Angry and Controlling Men. This is the absolute Bible for anyone who's been through this. And it just helped enormously. And then because I was such a wreck and I had already talked to like my sisters, I would talk to them like, my sister told me I could call her anytime, like sometimes at midnight for hours and hours. And then I finally was like, I can't just put my friends and family through this anymore. And it's not just a hotline, it is a helpline. And I found that I was able to call. It doesn't have to be an emergency, but if you're just like really anxious or you just need to vent or talk about it, it's true. Like you just call up the helpline. And I was a helpline respondent myself. So I know that sometimes people just want to talk for hours, and that's the training that we get is it's all about just letting them talk. And most of the time it is that they just want to talk, but you're just able to talk for hours. And then Next Step, they also helped me legally, with the legal process, because even though I had a lawyer, I just feel like some lawyers aren't as DV attuned as the lawyers that will be in the agencies. And so I was able to get advice from a DV standpoint. I mean, the domestic abuse agencies understand DV like no one else. So you just call them, and as you were saying, whatever the need is, they're going to, whatever you want, they're going to help you with it.
So thank you, Patricia. I think it's really important to hear from survivors what's helpful, and that we as advocates don't assume that we know. It's always important to check in and ask survivors what they need.
Can I just ask Cindy? I'm just curious because Cindy has been in this since the 70s. Is that right? The field that you've been in this field for that long? Is that right?
Well, I was a volunteer for Spruce Run probably in like 1978-ish. And then I moved to Dover Foxcroft where I became a volunteer for Women Care. Yeah. So yes, a long time of doing this work, Patricia.
And what is your perspective on how maybe you've seen DV change or the needs of DV change, or maybe even like any perspective on the evolution of time, how things have changed or not changed?
Well, I think the most obvious change is that we're talking about it. I think we were so, certainly in the late 70s and early 80s, it was such an underground movement. And I think that, sadly, I don't think that abuse itself has changed, except that there are more ways to be abusive at this point in time. Technology has certainly contributed to people having access to more information in a helpful way, but it has also provided abusive people more ways to abuse their victims. And so I have to say, you know, about 20 years ago, when I met Tamar, I was feeling a bit, I think I've been through kind of a roller coaster. Certainly early on as a young person, working for social change in this movement, I thought, oh, we got this, you know. By 2000, it'll be gone, it'll be history. And now I realize we're not going to see the end to domestic violence in my lifetime, if ever. So I do feel discouraged in that way, but I feel encouraged every day because there's so many more people reaching out for assistance. So individually, I know that we're making a difference. I know that there are many well, people just know. They know what's happening, unlike when, you know, I was abused as a young woman, or you were abused, Patricia. We didn't really know what is happening. And now we're educating people. We're educating young men and young women.
Isn't that true? That even the vocabulary, to have the vocabulary, to know this is domestic abuse, right? Or this is isolation, or this is gaslighting. Absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, so just the vocabulary is huge.
Yeah. So I agree. And so when I think about those things, I become more hopeful. But I just think that generationally, this has existed since time began. I'm pretty confident of that now. And we've tried to do a lot in the last few decades, and we have accomplished a lot. And there's much more to do. So that's my reflection at this point in time.
I think that, thank you. I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is just get out how much of this there is, because more and more, I really just feel like it's a groundswell with Finding Our Voices, because I'm talking to 2 people tomorrow. I mean, more and more people are calling me and wanting to talk about it and letting me know it happened. It just passed. When I go around and give out the banners, I do that by myself. I want to be able to go into the places and hand them to the people, no matter where I go. You know, Booth Bay Harbor, Eastport, Mount Desert Island, Mid-Coast. A lot of the times there's somebody in that store who has been through it, and it's either like the most horrific thing you can imagine, and sometimes, and often when they either grew up in it, or they've had one of a relationship themselves, or maybe a family member, you know. But it's just, I had no idea how much there is. You know, you both know, you all know how much there's of this going on. And that's what I think is promising, is if we get more people out there knowing how much of this there is, how dark it is, how insidious it is, that's when there'll be really a call for change, because, right, to know how many people it really does affect.
Patricia, as you talk, it makes me think, you know, with Finding Our Voices, you created your own Me Too movement, basically, because I think there's so much power for survivors in knowing that they're not alone. And you've given people the opportunity to share their experience and have that impact on somebody else. A couple of questions in the chat. One person was curious if any male victims had come forward to use their voice with the banners.
There's a couple of people. There's one man I know who I see him when I get my coffee, and he was in a relationship for 25 years with another man that was extremely abusive. And we're talking, he might decide that he wants to talk about it publicly. And there's another man, when I was giving one of these things out, who let me know that he'd been through horrific abuse as a child from his stepfather, who was abusive to the mother, obviously. He may talk about it. You know, there's nobody yet, no man yet, but I've let them, you know, I'm looking out for, to include a man. I just think on one hand, though, you got to be careful with that. I think that with the domestic, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that with domestic abuse agencies, because you get federal funds, that you have to always, you know, be very inclusive as far as including men whenever you talk about domestic abuse. but I just feel like I know it happens to men. Like there's no question about it. I've seen it. But I feel like it sort of changes the conversation a little bit when you bring men into it. And men, for instance, okay, when I was in Istanbul, I went to this, it was a International Women's Day. There was the domestic abuse violence groups in Turkey put this on, and it's a big protest march. And they don't let men march. Men come anyway sometimes, but they have a policy of not letting men march because they just say that men's voices drown out the women's voices. That's interesting. And so I just don't know. I'm sort of not sure about it. We have men who are friends to find our voices, and that it's so helpful because they're very supportive, and we need men to change this, right? But there is something kind of comforting in having kind of a sisterhood. So I'm just really not sure how it's going to go as far as really putting a man up on a banner, for instance.
And there was another question about if you all think that families are more supportive now than in the past. And then there's another question about sort of who's the breadwinner and needing to do better. And so I think some of that's getting at some of those reasons we stay quiet. And if the reasons within families, reasons we don't talk about it, reasons sort of people don't come forward, if those have changed or are really the same, which Cindy, I think, was speaking to a little bit. So I don't know if Cindy or Casey or Patricia want to sort of speak to some of those things that help keep victims silent rather than coming forward, I think.
Casey was doing this. Was this the balance of the balance thing that you were doing?
Oh, I was thinking of, if I could just go back to like a thought before that. Actually, Cindy just reached out to me with an email that I keep on thinking about responding to, and I haven't responded yet because she was asking about books, literature for male victims of abuse, and I've been ruminating on this a bit about how when women experience abuse, they are often abused because they are women. And when men experience abuse, it's not often that they're being abused because they are a man. That really is not the case. Typically, when a male victim is when a male person is victimized, their abuser is pulling from some sort of belief system and some framework of belief that tells them that they have the right to do that. And so, for example, I've worked with a male victim of abuse who was being abused by his female partner, and she seemed to really believe that she had the right to use violence against him because he was disabled and he had a low IQ. And so she was pulling from this framework of entitlement that came from ableism, that came from intellectualism, versus when women experience abuse, they typically are abused based on, their abusers are abusing them based on this framework of entitlement, based on sexism and misogyny, sometimes homophobia and transphobia, because while we've talked about men and women, we're missing a whole population of transgender folks. And actually, when people ask me the question, what is the gender that experiences the highest rates of abuse? It's actually not female people, it's transgender people experience the very highest rates of abuse out of any other gender identity, at a rate of 54% of transgender people experience domestic violence and abuse. And that's not even including the folks who experience violence from other places. And at the same time, the two examples that Patricia brought up of men that wanted to come forward for her project were male victims of other men's violence. And so I think that needs to be noted as well, that it's often men who are the perpetrators of abuse, and abuse and violence are embedded in our culture. And so, here's the other thing. Especially when someone is a white cisgender male, they're born into a world where the tools to abuse are at their fingertips. They're just there, they're readily available. And we live in a culture in which that is tolerated and perpetuated. And yet other people can perpetuate abuse who are not white male and cisgender.
So Casey, I actually think that fits into, you were going back a question, but I actually think it fits really well into the question about families and expectations, and is it okay to talk, and those structures, those societal structures are what allow men to batter women based on gender. There are other structures that support the other types of violence you're talking about. But so while yes, in answer to the question, I think as we do more talking about it, it's more likely that we can break down some of those norms that allow battering and perpetration of violence in relationships, but they still exist. So I think it's one of those sort of good and bad news questions around, yes, I think people can come forward more, and all these conversations do help support that, but some of those societal beliefs that support violence happening very much still exist.
Well, also the family dynamic is really important. The balance of power is really important. And in so many cases, for instance, the man, because he's like my ex, I couldn't work. I was a journalist before I met him, but when I was married to him, I couldn't work because I had to be available to be his playmate, basically, and to support his work. And so I didn't have an income except for I was a children's photographer, so I had an income, but it wasn't anything close to his income. So when we're getting divorced, for instance, there's the disparity between the income, which allows them to get the better lawyer, and also the woman, because she's been isolated and been controlled, that's a big fear as far as leaving, because how is she going to support herself? And then there's that whole thing with the children. She's really concerned about the protection of her children. And the court is so out of whack, because unless the person has physically abused the child, they don't consider that abuse, even though he may have strangled and raped the mother in front of the child. They don't consider that's not abusing the child. So then a lot of times, I know of one case where he is looking at getting visitation and potential part custody. So there's the family dynamic. I think you have to talk about how women are affected by wanting to protect their children and not having the financial resources. And Cindy, could we put it to Cindy and see what Cindy's observed in clients that she's worked with as far as that goes?
I have to say, I was thinking more systemically about what's going on right now with the hearings at the Supreme Court, and how Christine Ford has been held up as like a woman who made something up about Brett Kavanaugh, althoh
she's been held up with that.
Oh, I've been listening to the hearings off and on this week, and she's being like castigated as this evil woman who ruined tried to ruin his life,
oh my God,
rather than a survivor of a horrendous sexual assault. And now, so when we think about the structures that exist in our culture that support male voices over women's voices a good deal of the time, and perpetrators' voices over victim survivor voices frequently.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why in my comments a little while ago, I might have sounded like, oh, poor old Cindy, she's toasted, because these forces, of course, have been at work all of our lifetimes. But when you see it repeatedly being held up as, this is the way the system works, it's pretty discouraging. We've made great strides, but there's still so much to do to change the dominant forces.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, look at the police chief in Dover Foxcroft arrested for domestic violence, strangling a woman. This is the police chief. What does that mean for all the times when a woman called 911 or was hoping to get help from the police if the person directing the response is a domestic abuser. And it's pretty scary. And that's just something that came out to the public. Who knows how much else there is going on in the system with other people who are in, other men who are in charge, who are actual, you know, abusers themselves.
Yes.
Cindy or Casey, do you want to speak to that at all? Casey's like, yes, I do.
I know Cindy does too. I'll let her go first.
Well, I guess maybe just on the ground here in Dover-Foxcroft, I know that, you know, members of the public have come forward saying they don't feel confident, they don't feel safe calling the police. Why would you call the police if you're an abuse victim when the police themselves are abusers? So that's a pretty basic on the ground response and question that I've heard from a survivor who came to a select board meeting to say that, you know, and basically like, what are we, what is the community going to do about that, was her larger question. So
I talked to I talked to a survivor just the other day, and she told me that, you know, she told me her story, and she said that she called 911, and this big burly policeman shows up. I mean, he may have been a kind guy, but that's the last thing she wanted to see right then is a man. And especially to divulge to a man what had happened to her. Why aren't there more women on these police forces? And the other thing is, what do you think about the fact of having a woman who comes to every domestic violence call and is an advocate for the woman and basically gives the woman her card and says, follow up with me, and can help her guide her through the process?
Casey, do you want to talk about that a bit? That's something that's happened in the Portland area, I know.
Yeah, and Aroostook as well. Yeah. It is there's a program called EPIC. Oh, let's see. Enhanced Police Intervention. Something that starts with a C. Anyway, it really is a program. There are federal funds for it that make it so that domestic violence advocates can it's funding for a position to go along with law enforcement for the 48-hour follow-ups. Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, so that is happening in some parts of the state, not across the board, and certainly not all completely consistent, because of course, you know, law enforcement has to invite us to be there in order for us to be there. And it's not necessarily, it doesn't happen with the 911 call, but it's during the follow-up when it's safer for an advocate to accompany. And typically that is a female advocate. Certainly we also have some females in law enforcement. You know, I guess I wish for a world in which that didn't need to happen, that we didn't need to have such a need for law enforcement necessarily. And I guess I would also say that, as we've said, you know, calling law enforcement is not necessarily the safest option for survivors. It's not necessarily the option that every survivor wants to make. It's in fact not always the survivor that makes the call, and then all of a sudden now they're engaged in this criminal justice process that maybe they really never wanted to be a part of in the first place.
That's a good point, because I know for me, for instance, I called 911 just because I was going to die if I didn't call, and I just had the chance to call them. But then it just set all these other things in motion that I didn't want, really. Like at the time, I just wanted everything to stay secret like it always had. I just wanted it to stop. And that's what I was begging the police officer, don't arrest, because I just want to be safe, you know. But now that you've come and he's calmed down, I'm sure it'll be okay. But on the other hand, even though I was begging them not to arrest him, and I didn't want everything else that followed, it was the best thing in the world that could have happened, because it got me free and it got me safe. And it gave me enough time with the bail conditions to really think for the first time and get that fog, you know, defog and get him out of my brain. which comes to another point, which I'm wondering what you all think. But for instance, the district attorneys, they'll ask, they check with the victim. If the victim doesn't want to cooperate, sometimes they'll say, well, we're not going to prosecute. If the victim, if the victim's telling us, we don't want you to prosecute this guy because he's, supporting the family, whatever reason, and then they feel sometimes they have to listen to the victim's voice. I mean, I just feel sometimes that because of what we're going through and what we went through, that's a decision sometimes that maybe we're not in a position. I mean, it's strange things. I know it's all about giving the victim voice, but I know that for myself, I, at the time, would have didn't want him to be arrested. I didn't want anything like that, but it was the right thing because he's a criminal and what he was doing to me was criminal. So, it's like, I think it is like a cult where you're in it and you just can't see it until you get like basically deprogrammed, which I feel the domestic abuse agencies help do. So that's a question too, isn't it? Like how much should the victim have a say in the prosecutions, let's say? Like when
Patricia, I think, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that when the victims want it to be prosecuted, that's when they really have to come in and really do the job. And that's what really bothers me is when I wanted, after when I, my brain had cleared enough to understand what was going on, I was completely cooperating and they still didn't go, they still didn't prosecute him. So when the victim wants them prosecuted, they really have to do it. But how about the other thing when the victim just doesn't really want it to happen, but even though he's a really bad guy and he's very dangerous?
But I think in those moments, oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Well, I was just thinking when you were speaking about how there's this tension around what does the larger community want? What does the state of Maine want? And we, over the years have said to women, this isn't up to you now because this community standard has been broken or abridged or whatever. And now it's the state of Maine versus your abuser. And so sometimes that's really like a comfort to people because they think, whew, I don't have to shoulder this all myself. I have allies in the prosecutorial system. The courts are sticking up for me. But I know it doesn't always play out to feel that way. But there is that tension around once the system's force has been invoked, then the victim may experience that level of support, but may also feel like, oh, now I don't have any control over what's happening to my family. So it's a tension that exists, and I just think we could have so much better a system if we focused on what is it that's right for this victim survivor and this family.
And if they gave her more support, right? Like that's part of it, is that she's looking to maybe to the guy for money, and because she's so dependent on him, and if you take him out as a breadwinner, then she's stuck. But what if the state stepped in and not only took over the case, but if that's the case, but gave her support? Like if there was money in a victim's fund to help her, and then if they helped her in all these other ways, like this is another thing that one of these women have told me, that this guy goes to jail for strangling her, and he gets all this therapy because it's mandated. She doesn't get any therapy. No one's mandating therapy or providing therapy for her. And so it's like all the services go to the perpetrator, and they just leave the victim to fend for herself. And then, she can't even get a divorce because of COVID, that everything's so backed up, so she can't get any child support. And it's just, it's terrible how she gets no support. So I think you were maybe alluding to the system is really screwed up in that there's no support for the victim. Except for the domestic abuse agency.
Cindy, we've worked together way too long because I also was going to talk about the tension between the public safety aspect and sort of how we want things to be survivor driven, because we truly believe the survivor knows what's best and what's safe for them. But there are those moments when it would have been helpful for someone else to just say, no, this is not okay. I think another tension exists in the child protective system in that way. That's another place where when people become engaged in systems, it can not work out well for the mother who's been trying to protect their child in the home. Even though she's been trying to protect, she may be the one who ends up engaged in the child protective process, where the perpetrator or batterer just may simply not be engaged at all. And that pressure and fear around child protective being involved, even if child protective is really just trying to offer some of those resources Patricia was just talking about, it's a scary place for a family and a parent to be. So we ask all the time, you know, why does the victim not call law enforcement? Why does the victim not leave? Why does the victim not do all these things? But we've created systems that don't support or help the victim survivor to the degree they should in a perfect world.
That's so true. This woman told me just a couple of days ago, she said that if she had to do it all over again, and this guy again was like totally abusive, almost killed her, she called 911. It set a series of things in motion. She was pressured by the DA to they were going to dismiss the charges because of a felony on his record was going to get in the way of her alimony, and she ended up not getting any money anyway, and on and on and on. And she said if it happened again, that he came back, she said she would die before she would call 911 again.
There's a comment in the chat about an observation that many men who batter don't see themselves that way. And so might be watching a story on the news and even comment about how horrible it is that this person on the news has battered or is abusive, and not see that in themselves, not recognize sort of the systems they're engaging in when they're battering. So I think that's an interesting comment, interesting when we think about people like law enforcement being arrested, or famous people or other folks on the news presented a certain way. And I think the ability for some batterers to separate their own behavior from what they're seeing elsewhere and sort of be living in those systems we talked about that allow that battering to happen in the relationship. I will say that within batterers intervention programs, that's where the shift is being aimed at, the education to recognize those systems, to recognize what allows someone to batter and offer the opportunity to change that behavior. I did just want to share that observation from the chat because I think we know that people can see it elsewhere, but not necessarily see it within themselves.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
It was, I don't know if everybody remembers Mel Gibson. Do you remember that whole Mel Gibson thing that happened with his rant that was recorded? More than a rant. So I remember at the time, how would you describe it? It was just like the most horrific abuse to his girlfriend, just like an onslaught of just like something out of The Exorcist, really, right? And my ex at the time was so fascinated with that, and he was doing the exact same thing. Like if I had a tape recorder and pressed play, it would have been interchangeable. But it's so weird how he didn't see that he was doing it. And I don't know if I thought at the time, like, are you kidding me? Like, I kind of wanted to say, like, you do this exact same thing. But the thing is that when he did it, he went into a zone a different zone, right? Like, you know, everyone knows like the switch flips, that whole thing where they become like a different person, supposedly. But that's probably bogus. Like women think that he becomes a different person, but he's really completely, from what Lundy Bancroft says, he's in control. He knows what he's doing, and it's just to really frighten you. But I don't understand. Like it goes right with that person said. I don't know if my ex really didn't know that he did the same thing, or what that was all about. But by commenting on it as if it was such a unusual thing. So Casey, did you have anything to say about that, or? Yeah, because what's that switch flip, right? Is that true? What do you think from being or any of you from being in the field yourself? Like when how often do you hear women say that, like the Jekyll and Hyde, the switch flipping, like becoming a completely different person? Like isn't that classic?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think you put it really well. I think the only thing to like you said, they are in control of it. They are in control of when they turn it on and turn it off, depending on who's there, because probably they're going to turn it off if other people are around, or if law enforcement knocks on the door, probably they're going to flip that switch right back off very quickly. And so we know that they're in control of it.
That's why they're Mr. Charming in the community. That's the other thing that's happened with these. As I've taken these banners around to the different towns, there have been a few of the people who've been the most charming and the most supportive men, the most charming, the most supportive, the most helpful with getting my message out. And then I get phone calls from ex-girlfriends and ex-wives, and I look them up, and they have a domestic violence conviction. So, you know, these guys, that's the other thing. Sometimes they present as the most charming, supportive, you know, people in our community. Do you find that to be true too, Cindy? Have you seen that the perpetrators sometimes are that way?
I think that's also kind of a classic profile, you know, not for everyone, but it does lead one to feel like, oh, I wonder if this face that we see is the real face. I wonder what this person is like at home. And I'm sure we can all think of people that we've had this utmost faith in or trust with, and then later you find out, oh, not the person I thought he was.
And that's why some women find it hard to speak out about it, because no one's going to believe them. Because and even when they do, they still, you know, he's a good old boy, or everyone knows him and loves him. Because so that's another reason why it's hard to speak out.
And I just want to draw the parallel between that and when we think about child sexual abuse, and we think about perpetrators of child sexual abuse who certainly aren't someone you could pick out of a crowd, certainly are someone who has likely befriended the child or the family or is part of the family. And then sometimes we find out when it's someone high profile and we think, oh my gosh, how could they have done such a terrible, terrible thing? Often it's people in positions with access and power. So they might be someone very well known in the community, sort of famous in the community or popular in the community, someone who's maybe also done a lot of good in the community, but has this other side. So there is an interesting parallel when we think about batterers and those perpetrators as well, of sort of how you build your relationship with your victim is because you didn't start out that way, right? Like if the first time you met someone, they flipped that switch, you probably would not engage in the relationship after that. It's sort of that gradual process that happens. And I think there's pretty interesting similarities when we think about domestic violence batterers and perpetrators of child sexual abuse, that it's a similar process.
Well, that's what people say all the time. They're like, oh, if a man hit me, I'd be out there in a second. He doesn't come up to you and hit you. He sweeps you off your feet, you know, with flowers and roses and poetry. And he knows what you need maybe at the time, and he gives that to you. Which is what I, you know, talk to the exes, because they know the guy. I mean, they'll say, hey, he's a good guy, but we just didn't get along, or and listen, you know, because a lot of times the woman before, you know, knows what the situation is, and it's easy to not listen because you want to believe that this guy is the knight in shining armor that you see him to be, and he villainizes the ex, and you know, it's easy to slip into that. But I think women need to should pay attention to, you know, what the ex might have to say.
I'm just looking through the chat for a minute and see. I'm typing and looking. Sorry, apparently I cannot do both at once. So we have a person who kind of shared with panelists some of her own situation. And the question really is around continued abuse through the system. So I think something that does continue to happen and often happens through the civil legal system, unfortunately, is that you may, for example, get a protection order and then get a divorce, but subsequent to the divorce, the ex can often continually bring someone back to court. And that sometimes is their way of trying to maintain control over their former spouse. They can also refuse to comply with court orders and therefore put the spouse in the position of having to take the person back to court. My observation as an attorney for many years in the Law Project is that is a system that allows, unfortunately, batters to continue to exercise control by either not following court orders or dragging people back to court. I think it's a limitation of the legal system that we really very rarely are able to, a judge is very rarely able to say to someone, you can no longer come back to court. And it's a frustration that I just want to say I hear and recognize, and that there may be ways to sort of craft court orders that put an end to that, or allow less of that financial control or manipulation or abuse, but it is a very difficult system, and unfortunately, the situation you're describing is not necessarily unique. I think there are ways to manage that through court orders, but again, it's sort of one of those systems that doesn't necessarily support survivors in the way we wish it could.
One thing I think is, speaking from oh, sorry, Cindy, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to hear, I know there are better systems in other places where there's more of a family court system that really, I think, does a better job in protecting victim survivors and the children more. And we have some well, I don't know if they're experimental, but DV courts happening around the state. And I wondered if you, Casey, or Tamar could comment on more effective systems so that, you know, certainly right now I'm involved with several women who, you know, Child Protective is telling them this, and then they have their own civil proceeding going on with protection order and divorce. And then the criminal system is here, and they're not at all coordinated. And so it seems to me that that is something that systemically we could really work to change, so that Maine had a system that was, you know, just better coordinated. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could comment on that, Casey or Tamar, your awareness of other models.
Just quickly, from a systemic perspective, I think if you can have one judge hearing all aspects of the case, criminal, civil, child protective, if you can have a system where there is one judge who is hearing all of it, that helps get rid of some of the concerns we're talking about, because then there is a person who is seeing all the different pieces and they don't get to be compartmentalized. So I think in terms of ultimate systemic changes, that would be one that could be extremely helpful. If the judges are sort of educated on how to manage that process and the different systems and then domestic violence and all those things, but I know that is one system that can sort of impact what you're addressing. I don't know if you want to add anything, Casey.
Oh, I've got a lot swirling in my head. And certainly one of them is that not all abusive tactics are criminal. And people who are abusive are very, very savvy in the abusive tactics that they choose. And so this is not me suggesting that we make all abusive tactics criminal. I don't think that is going to do any good either. But just an acknowledgement of that reality, an acknowledgement of that reality. And then I keep on hearing two people talk about, not here in this room, but I often hear people talk about this broken system. And, you know, I have been made aware that the system wasn't designed and then it broke. Like, the system is actually operating in the exact way that it was designed for, you know, this quote unquote perfect victim who complies and who doesn't have mental health illnesses, who doesn't have substance use disorder, who is white and cisgender and, you know, checks all these boxes, and then maybe they will receive justice, maybe, you know. And so I'm just so aware of all of the injustices in our justice system. It is quite incredible. I'm very interested in exploring different ideas of restorative justice and transformative justice that are out there. And I think our movement as a whole, as an anti-violence movement in Maine, I think we want to explore those as options, because we know that what is available right now is really not working for the vast majority of survivors.
And offering more choices for survivors is always better.
I was going to say that I think it's important that everybody get training. I think that a little while ago they were training social workers, giving them some DV victim training, judges, lawyers, because for instance, my divorce lawyer, somehow they got in that anytime we wanted to bring something to the court over something, whatever it is, every time we wanted to bring something to it had to go through mediation. You don't request mediation with an abuser. It never works. It's just one more thing in the way of you getting justice. And as any divorce lawyer should be versed enough in DV, because it seems like that there are things that someone pointed out. There are things that can be put in the divorce settlement, for instance, when there is domestic abuse that can protect you, and those all need to be looked at.
As we near the end of our time, although it feels like we could talk forever, which we probably could, I would love to sort of wrap up by showing the Dover Foxcroft or Piscataquis, I'm not sure, slides. If that would work for folks as a way to sort of exit us out of this wonderful conversation. That is just, Patricia, I'm so appreciative of you bringing this to us. And
thank you. I
us
also want to say to Kara Hay of Penquis, who was so supportive of this, and Renee Muscatel, who put this together, and Tamar for you moderating, and Casey and Cindy, thank you so much. And it has been a wonderful group effort. And yeah, we can go through these slides. And I just want to say that also, as you're looking at them, that next spring, I'm talking with the Bangor Public Library, hopefully they'll be on board also about bringing not only our banners to Bangor, but writers speak about domestic violence, where we'll get writers in the windows of downtown businesses writing about their experience. So that's something that we'll look to. And I'll enjoy talking to Partners for Peace about, and hopefully Penquis also, about bringing that to Bangor. But yeah, we can look at what we've done here so far.
Patricia, are you okay if I just run these as a slideshow without talking about them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So these are up. I think they're still up in. Are they still up in the area? Yep. So these are just all the ones that Cindy and Casey arranged with the businesses to give us 4 foot by 2 foot chunk of space in their windows. And this is the guy, I think it was in Newport when I first entered the Penobscot line or Piscataquis. He said yes to Autumn's banner, and it's right there. And yeah, we could just run through them. Oh, am I supposed to be doing it? Am I supposed to be doing that, going through them?
Oh, I am doing it. They're not changing? Okay,
oh, no,
sorry.
No, they're not changing now.
Hang on just a second here.
I'm glad you're doing this and not me, because I'm worse than you technologically. Yeah, I just walked in there, and some of the ones Cindy and Casey had arranged for me, but sometimes when I saw a window that was big enough, I had like 50 banners in my car with me. I took a road trip and just went and just opened the door and asked the people, and they said yes. Here's Allie Oops.
Is it sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Allison in Allie Oops. I'd never been to I've never been to that area before, so it was interesting for me. Yeah, Patrick at the Center Theater. That's Becca. This is Betsy, who's a nurse in Bangor. This is Christine, who does all the framing for me. This is in Dover Foxcroft, in the antique store right on the main drag of Dover Foxcroft. Courtney in a wonderful antique store. Allie's Place, I think. Yeah, Allie's Place. Johnny, Bear's One Stop was fabulous. Gave me this great visibility with this window. And that's Johnny, who's from Brewer. And all the banners, as you can see, have the Partners for Peace helpline number. Judy. Yep. Megan, Dexter's Pizza didn't have a window big enough, so gave me the space right where people order their pizza, Dexter's House of Pizza, for Megan, who's an artist in Ellsworth. And Quirk Auto came on as a sponsor with Camden National Bank. Camden National Bank actually is the lead sponsor for all our banners. They gave us enough money to take the banners all over the state. And then we got Quirk Auto to come on board too. And we got them in a lot of car places. This is Meg, who's an architect and a neighbor of mine, which is great because that way we get a lot of the men seeing them as well as the women. Napa Auto. The laundromat, again, couldn't cover the window for security reasons, but let us put a picture of Mel, who owns the health food store in my town, up on the wall. This is Mia in the True Value in Dover Foxcroft. Millie, she's a prisoner that I mentioned. I did 2 women's book groups around Let's Talk About It, about the Lundy Bancroft book in the Wyndham prison. And I related to a lot of what she said. I've related to everything. It's something that every single woman who's come on board with me has said. The sheer design. Is this in Penquis office?
So the Dover office, yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Penquis was so helpful right away when they knew that we were bringing the banners. They reached out and they got their banners in their offices and then arranged this wonderful conversation. And I'm so happy to have them as partners with us.
This is at our Bangor office near our one entrance.
Oh, so you got our first Bangor banner. Yay. Well, actually, Quirk Auto said that I sent them 7 banners for their Bangor dealership. So they should be all around too. But this is fabulous that you did that. That's Eve.
Yeah, we have one more in the front office, in the front window street, but it's not included in the slide.
That's so fabulous. And especially because you do so much work with children, and children is such an important aspect of all of this because they're victims too.
That's it.
Thank you.
So I think that actually puts us pretty much on time, which is very impressive. Again, Patricia, thank you so much. This is such important work, and I'm so excited to imagine it coming to Bangor. So from someone who lives and works in Bangor, I'm pretty excited. So
fabulous. I'm talking to the Old Town Rotary tomorrow because I want to get the Rotary clubs involved with us too.
Yeah, it's great. It's amazing. I think the pictures are so powerful, as well as the quotes and the video. And just thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Cindy and Casey, as well, and Renee for all your help. And thank you everybody for being here. I know Renee sent out invitations. I'm sure that Cindy, Casey, or I would be certainly happy to answer any questions that come up if people need any resources or have more questions. Patricia, I didn't want to volunteer you without knowing for sure.
Yeah,
but Renee,
.net. Just get in touch with me, findingourvoices.net, hello@findingourvoices.net, and I'm happy to talk with anybody who wants to contact me.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.